Hey love bugs, I thought I would just pop in and do a quick video on the Iliad. There are a lot of book groups out there that are reading this right now. Hardcore Literature Book Club is going to read this year, and I'm super excited about it. I actually got to be I'm still a part of a Catherine Project conversation around the Iliad and the Odyssey that's just been a ton of fun. And you know me, I love extra stuff, so I'm gonna put together a list of on Substack of sort of extra things to enrich your Iliad reading experience. For those of you that are not familiar, the Iliad and the Odyssey are epic poems that sort of define the genre. So when you think of an epic poem, sort of the OG was the Iliad and the Odyssey. They also are really foundational texts for like Western literature. So, when we talk about sort of that great conversation between works of art, this is kind of a really, not kind of, a foundational text. So it's really, it's a really wonderful experience to get to read this. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information. We'll talk a little bit about translations, and then on the Substack, which is called People Reading Things, I will put some links for some other fun things. So let's start with some things you just need to know besides it's the foundational epic poem. Greeks would have definitely been familiar with this. The next thing you need to know is it was orally transmitted. So this was written before there was an alphabet, which makes for some interesting conversation around choosing a translation and accuracy, and I'll come back to that later. But you just need to know that it was orally transmitted and that there's a lot of questions around authorship. It's traditionally attributed to Homer. I think there's even questions whether or not that person existed. There's a lot of academic back and forth around it. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind when you're reading this text. So, another thing to know is that the backdrop for this is the Trojan War. And the Iliad picks up at year 9 of the Trojan War. So they've been fighting for 9 years already. You're in medias res. You're in the middle of things. And it's also important to know that the Trojan War started with the abduction of Helen. So Trojans abduct Helen. Greeks say, we're going to get her back. Another really important piece to know is that the Greeks were a little tricksy. And they are, when you think of the Trojan horse, that was the Greeks doing. And there was a lot of culturally not acceptable things done by the Greeks during the war that angered the gods, which is the setup for the long journey home. The reason the journey home was so long in the Odyssey was because the Greeks, the things that they did angered the gods, and the gods punished them by making their journey home super, super long. So that's really important to know. If you are curious about the mythology around the gods and goddesses, I can't recommend enough Edith Hamilton's mythology book. I never can get these straight in the screen, sorry. This is a really nice copy because it has like pictures. We all love pictures. Well, at least I love pictures. So this would be a recommend if you want to get more familiar with the stories that sort of inform the Iliad and the Odyssey. I have one caveat for that, dear friend. So it's important to know there are 2 stories that scholars do not think really apply. So one is the idea that Achilles is invulnerable except for his heel. That's not something the Greeks would have known at the time or would have assumed. And the other one is this story called the Judgment of Paris, I believe. Don't quote me on that. That also, there's some questions Sometimes in the text it feels like it's alluding to that. Scholars are on the fence though. So the Judgment of Paris text also might not be something that you can assume. And if you're wondering where I got all this great information, since Ben hasn't released his lecture yet, I'm so glad you asked, because my other recommendation would be the great courses. Elizabeth Vandiver has these really wonderful two courses, one on the Iliad, one on the Odyssey, that come with a PDF with notes for those of us like super nerds. It's very listenable. It's really it's pleasurable. It's informative. The lectures are wonderful, and I definitely recommend checking those out. So let's dive in a little bit into translations. Okay, there are a cajillion, that's a number, I just made it up, translation options. I had 4 at my disposal, and I'm going to go from my least favorite to my most favorite. So my least favorite, friends, is probably the one that most people were forced to read in high school, the Fagles. So the Fagles, despite having deckled edges, we all know how I feel about that, I couldn't get through it, folks. I kept getting stopped maybe 2 or 3 books in. The languaging feels a little cumbersome. It doesn't flow for me. One of the things that Ben says, and I just want to second, that if you're struggling with a classic text in translation, try a different translation. Don't let the translator stop you from enjoying a text. And especially in this case, my friends, where it was probably changed a little bit every time it was told, accuracy is not as important, in my opinion, to this particular text as it would be, say, to something else. So let it rip. If this doesn't work for you, or you were forced to read this and you hated it, please, please, please give the Iliad another chance, because it could just be a translation problem. So my next favorite is actually the Lattimore. So, and I bought the Great Books of the Western World encyclopedia set. So that's why I have this here. Here's a book. This is the Lattimore. People will squawk about this one being too academically dense. I think it's beautiful. It is not as readable out loud as my favorite one is, but it's still, I think it's gorgeously translated, just gorgeous. This is like, if you really like academic writing and you enjoy that sort of like flowy, flowery speech, the Lattimore is going to be for you. My next favorite is going to be the Peter Green. So this one is going to be gorgeous, right? Gorgeous books. This one is sort of a blend between the Lattimore and my favorite, the Emily Wilson. So if you're looking for accuracy and poetry and a gorgeous box set, if the aesthetic's really important to you, it's definitely important to me, the Peter Green would be the way to go. The crown jewel, my friends, my 10 out of 10 recommend, is Emily Wilson. You can see I've been having a great time. I can't even talk about it without getting emotional. Read this and read it out loud. It is, or if you don't like the sound of your own voice, get the audiobook and listen to it read out loud. It is, I think, the way this text was intended to be delivered. Definitely read the translator notes. I don't often encourage that because those can be kind of dry and boring, but Emily Wilson is just a fascinating human, an incredible translator, and sometimes when we're reading these academic texts, I don't know, she brings it to life. This This book is going on my list of one of my like top favorites of all time. I cried for 3 days over Patroclus' death. 3 days, people. Because I was reading it out loud and I literally got just profoundly choked up. This is an incredible work of art and just an homage to translation. So, that would be my translation choice, and I think I already sort of alluded to it, but read it out loud. Read it out loud. Look for the similes. The similes are fascinating here. I definitely recommend. I went through and highlighted the similes and made notes about what that says about the time period and the culture. Some of the other things that can be really helpful are like make little notes of who is speaking. Sometimes that can be confusing. Less so in the Emily Wilson, by the way. She makes that profoundly clear, but if you're reading some of the other translations, so like with the Lattimore, I have been so giving the chapters my own title, and I've been marking major plot points, like little synopsis of like what happened when. If you're reading something like the Lattimore or the Peter Green, it might make that just a little more easy to follow and easy to pick up in case you forgot. I'm going to cover this more in depth in the Substack, but one of the joys of reading for me is really diving into the text, and so I'll link a bunch of things. The Iliad and the Odyssey are just ripe for fanfic. Like, there is so much great stuff out there. Pat Barker has a series, and we have the first two called The Silence of the Girls. If you've read Achilles by Madeline Miller, you know what I'm talking about. That book wrecked me. I think that fanfic sometimes makes me cringe a little, but in this particular case, it's just right for it. The other recommendation, so besides Madeline Miller's books, which are fantastic, and Pat Barker's, check out Epic the Musical. My students got me hooked on it, and it is amazing. It's amazing art and an amazing sort of commentary. I think the fact that people are still writing musicals and retellings just speaks to how transcendent of a piece of art the Iliad is. So check out the Substack. I'll link all the fun things, including the translations. And I really, really hope you fall in love with this, because I did. And y'all, I get chills when I think of some of these scenes, and I really hope that you get to have this experience too. So much love, happy reading, happy spring. It's wonderful to see everyone, and thank you so much for being on this journey with me. It just means the world to me, and especially in a time where we're all so divided, to join together around something as timeless as books and reading. So much love. Mwah!